My name is Wendy Tinsley. I'm 30 years old, and for most of my adult life, I believed I was building something real, something solid with the man I loved, Logan Whitfield. I used to think love was about showing up, about making a home feel warm, about being the steady hand someone could fall into after a hard day. I didn't know I was building everything on sand. The apartment smelled like garlic rosemary and toasted bread, the kind of scent that always made me think of safety. I'd gotten home early, lit a candle, tidied the living room, even chilled the Sauvignon Blanc Logan liked. It was a Tuesday, nothing special, but I'd always believed ordinary days could be made extraordinary with a little effort. Logan had been under pressure lately at his new job. A demanding boss, unrealistic deadlines, the constant hum of stress vibrating through him. I wanted him to walk in and feel relief, peace, home. I was stirring the pasta when I heard his key turn in the lock. In here I called. He dropped his bag by the door with a heavy thud. God, what a day. My supervisor is a demon with a clipboard. I smiled. Hopefully a well-seasoned one, I said, gesturing toward the roasted chicken. Dinner's almost ready. And I got that wine you like. He gave a tired smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Lately, fewer things did. He slid onto a stool at the kitchen island, pulling out his phone immediately. The blue glow washed over his face, highlighting the exhaustion. This was our rhythm. I created calm. He collapsed into it. I didn't mind, not then. As we ate, he vented about work. I listened. I told him about the new team software I was learning. He half listened. It was familiar, comforting the way small routines become their own kind of language between two people. And then his phone buzzed, then buzzed again, and again. Rapid fire. I glanced over the rim of my glass. Popular tonight? He didn't look up. Group chat from work. Chaos, as usual. But a few minutes later, a different tone chimed a melodic triplet I hadn't heard before. A notification banner slid across the screen. I wasn't snooping. I didn't even shift my eyes deliberately. They just drifted the way anyone's would when a bright screen lights up in the corner of their vision. Hinge, Jenna. So, when do I get to see that smile in person? My fork froze midair. The sound around me sharpened the scrape of metal against ceramic, the faint hum of the refrigerator, my own quiet inhale. I set my fork down. Logan. He looked up, eyebrows raised in mild irritation, not guilt. Never guilt. What? I reached over and tapped the screen lightly with one finger. What's this? He followed my gesture. For a second, surprise flickered across his face. Then it was gone, replaced by something colder annoyance. Oh my God, Wendy. He sighed, grabbing the phone. Can you not be weird? Don't read my notifications. I didn't have to read it, I said quietly. It was right there, on Hinge Logan. Hinge. The app name tasted poisonous. He clicked his tongue as if I were being dramatic. You're blowing this out of proportion. My chest tightened. Since when are you on dating apps? Another sigh, long performative, dripping with irritation. He set the phone down, but made no attempt to explain himself. He simply stared at me with a look that said this conversation was an inconvenience. The cozy bubble of our evening shriveled. The warmth evaporated. I thought we were exclusive, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm not talking to anyone else. He laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh, not even a nervous one. It was sharp, derisive. The kind of laugh you'd give a child who asked if unicorns were real. Well, that's your choice, he said, shrugging. Of course I'm talking to other women. I have to keep my options open. My mouth went dry. Options. He leaned forward, voice dripping with smug certainty. I'm not going to limit myself when you're not even my best option. The words sliced cleanly through the air, precise, devastating. The apartment we painted together. The meals. The quiet nights. The future I thought we were planning. All of it disintegrated under the weight of that single sentence. Logan, I breathed, unable to process the casual cruelty. He raised a hand, cutting me off. Look, it's just the modern world. Don't be naive. You're comfortable. You're safe. But I'm waiting for extraordinary. Why would I put all my eggs in one basket if that basket is, middle of the road? Each word pressed deeper, sharpened, twisting. You're not serious, I whispered. I'm perfectly serious, he said, almost bored. I deserve options. Something inside me, something tender and hopeful, snapped cleanly apart, and in the silence that followed, something else settled in its place. A stillness. A clarity so cold it felt like standing barefoot on ice. I placed my napkin on the table. I stood up. His chair squeaked as he straightened. Wendy, come on, don't be dramatic. We're just talking. But I wasn't hearing him anymore. I walked calmly to the closet, took my jacket, the one he said made me look reliable, as if that were my highest aspiration, and put it on. He followed me to the doorway, his irritation shifting to confusion. Wendy, seriously, we are not done talking. My hand paused on the doorknob. No, I said softly without looking at him. We're done. I opened the door and stepped out into the hallway. No slam, no theatrics, just the soft click of the latch, the single most final sound of my life. I walked down the stairs, out of the building, into the cold night air. I didn't know where I was going, only that I was leaving. The hotel room greeted me with the bland, neutral smell of citrus cleaner and faint detergent, the type of scent that belongs to places without stories. I closed the door behind me and stood still for a moment, letting the unfamiliar quiet settle around me. Beige walls, a king-sized bed with perfectly tucked sheets, a desk no one had ever cried at or worked late into the night over. No memories of Logan, no reminder of the life I had spent years propping up, just silence deep and echoing, waiting for me to breathe in it. I set my supermarket bag on the dresser and finally exhaled. The sound felt strange in the sterile room, like it came from someone lighter, unburdened. I changed into the stiff t-shirt I had just bought, brushed my teeth with the new toothbrush plugged in the new phone charger. Each routine task felt like a small act of separation, a quiet, intentional cutting of threads that had tied me to someone who had never valued what I gave. When I sat down on the edge of the bed, the ache arrived. It wasn't the sharp, dramatic pain movies like to dramatize. It was deeper, almost physical, the ache of something dissolving from the inside out. It wasn't grief over losing Logan. It was grief over the version of myself who had believed in him, depended on him, fought for a future he treated like a placeholder. I didn't cry. Instead, I picked up my phone and opened my banking app. The joint savings account labeled Future looked obscene, now a financial monument to a life that had never truly existed. Without hesitation, I transferred exactly half into my personal account. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't pettiness. It was mathematical, fair, neutral, and strangely liberating. Then I blocked Logan's number, blocked him on social media, and watched the screen return to its quiet blank state. Each deleted connection felt like clearing space in a house I had finally decided to renovate. I slept in the center of the king-size bed that night. The silence wasn't lonely. It was spacious. It felt like realizing you'd been clenching your jaw for years and finally letting it loosen. 14 days passed this way. During that time, I found a furnished studio on the opposite side of the city. It sat above a small bakery that smelled like cinnamon every morning and next to an alley where delivery trucks rattled at dawn. The apartment itself was simple white walls, mismatched furniture, a small window facing a brick wall. To anyone else, it would have felt cramped. To me, it felt like oxygen. I coordinated the retrieval of my suitcases from the old apartment during a weekday afternoon when I knew Logan would be at work. I walked through the apartment we once called ours without hesitation, past the kitchen, where he'd blindly dismantled our relationship, past the walls we'd painted together. That space no longer belonged to me, and I no longer belonged to it. I packed my belongings quickly and left without looking back. In my new studio, I unpacked my survival kit from the first night items that had once symbolized collapse, now representing transition. My routines rebuilt themselves in gentle, steady rhythms, early morning runs when the streets were still empty, quiet showers where steam softened the sharp edges of my thoughts, simple meals made without the weight of waiting for someone, evenings spent reading by the window with the faint sounds of the bakery below humming like background music. One evening, around the 2-week mark, my phone vibrated on the coffee table. Not a call, just a text from an unknown number. I didn't rush to pick it up. I finished my page, closed my book, and then glanced at the screen. Logan, are you seriously still ignoring me? It was a joke, Wendy. You take everything so seriously. The message sat there like a piece of debris washed up from a storm I no longer lived inside. He called it a joke. The laugh he had delivered, the condescension, the dismissal, the slicing away of my worth, all dismissed as humor, I had somehow failed to appreciate. I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, only distance. I placed the phone back on the table and returned to my book. That message was a fossil evidence of a creature that no longer lived in my world. The next day, my phone rang. It was Mason, a mutual friend who was loyal more to truth than to either of us. His voice carried a cautious concern. "You doing okay?" he asked. I told him I was. Truly I was. He hesitated before telling me what Logan had been saying, that I had overreacted, had a meltdown, dramatized a harmless joke, abandoned him without explanation. Logan was rewriting the narrative for anyone who would listen. I didn't interrupt. I let Mason continue. Then he delivered the part he had clearly been building toward. "Well, it's not going well for him," Mason said quietly. "He got fired." He explained that Logan had tanked a major client presentation unprepared, rattled, overwhelmed by questions, spiraling into panic. His boss had called it a fundamental lack of diligence. As Mason spoke, memories surfaced, nights spent helping Logan revise slide decks, proofread reports, prepare answers, calm his nerves. I had been the invisible infrastructure behind his confidence. Without me, his foundation cracked instantly. Mason continued, He told me not having your support messed him up, that he didn't have his usual safety net." I let the words settle. For the first time, Logan understood I had never been ordinary. I had been essential. But that realization was his lesson, not my burden. Not long after that conversation, the messages began again from yet another new number. "Wendy, I'm sorry. It was a stupid thing to say. I was stressed. You've always been my best option. I was just scared." The shift in tone was so predictable it almost felt scripted. Apologies without accountability, regret without recognition. He wasn't sorry for what he'd done. He was sorry for the consequences that had landed on him. I didn't respond. The next evening, "Wendy, they fired me. I can't pay rent. I need you, please." Those 3 sentences revealed everything. He didn't miss me. He missed what I did for him. He missed the stability, the structure, the invisible scaffolding I had provided without ever being thanked for it. Logan wasn't reaching out because he loved me. He was reaching out because his life functioned better when I was holding it together for him. I read the message while tying my running shoes. I finished the knot, slipped the loop under, tightened it, and stood. Then I went for my run without replying, without hesitation, without even a flicker of temptation. His collapse was his own. His desperation was not my responsibility. And the middle-of-the-road basket he dismissed so casually had simply rolled itself out of his reach quietly and permanently. I didn't expect Mason's call to be the beginning of a slow unraveling, but as the days passed, it became clear that Logan's life was crumbling in ways even he hadn't anticipated. The more distance I put between us, the more pieces seemed to fall off him, like he had been held together with invisible threads I never realized I'd been supplying. After Mason told me about the failed presentation, the firing, the panic, I spent the next few evenings observing my own reaction carefully, almost clinically. There was no satisfaction and no bitterness. What surprised me most was the absence of surprise itself. I realized slowly and painfully that I had always been the one smoothing over his rough edges. When he forgot deadlines, I reminded him gently. When he spiraled into anxiety, I steadied him. When he doubted himself, I prepared him for his meetings, walked him through potential pitfalls, and offered him confidence he never cultivated on his own. Without me, his carefully presented competence had nothing underneath it, and now the facade was collapsing. A week after Mason's call, the messages changed again. They came in waves like storms that never learned when to stop. First, Logan tried to minimize what he'd done, still holding on to the narrative that everything was a misunderstanding. When that angle didn't get the reaction he wanted, he shifted into sentimentality, sending long paragraphs about memories, nights. We cooked dinner together. The trips we'd taken, the future plans he claimed he still wanted. He wrote as if nostalgia alone could glue a shattered foundation back together. When he got no reply, his tone hardened. He accused me of being heartless, dramatic, immature. He wrote that walking out had been cruel, that I had blindsided him, that I owed him a conversation. Then, as abruptly as he'd turned angry, he turned needy. He asked for help, for advice, for comfort. He claimed he had no one else to talk to. He sent photos of eviction notices. He described his sleepless nights, his panic attacks, the feeling of his life slipping out from under him. Every time a new message arrived, my phone buzzed like a reminder that someone else's world was collapsing. But mine was finally beginning to stabilize. I read every message, not out of hope or curiosity, but out of a desire to understand just how deep the illusion had been, the illusion that we were equals building something together. In truth, I had been doing the building. He had simply been standing in the house I constructed, admiring the architecture and assuming the structure would never fail. One afternoon, while I was working on a small writing project at my tiny kitchen table, Mason called again. His voice was heavier, this time more hesitant, as if he wasn't sure whether he should even tell me what he was about to say. "Are you sitting down?" he asked. I almost smiled at the predictability of the question. "I am." "What's going on?" Well, Logan's not doing great," he said. "And I don't mean the job situation. He's unraveling emotionally. It's been bad." I waited silently for him to continue. "He hasn't talked to his parents. He's avoiding his friends. He refuses to admit what he did to you, but he told Mark that he can't handle the consequences. He's saying he feels abandoned." The word abandoned sat heavily in the air, but it didn't land on me. Not the way he probably expected. I thought about the night in the kitchen, the confidence with which Logan told me I wasn't his best option, the casual cruelty he wielded as if he had nothing to lose. I wasn't the one who abandoned anything. I simply stopped carrying a weight that had never been mine in the first place. Mason continued, "Look, I'm not calling to guilt trip you or anything. I'm just saying, whatever he's going through, it's the fallout." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. The fallout was always going to happen, Mason. He just never believed he'd have to experience it. There was a long silence before he spoke again. "He keeps saying he doesn't have the tools to get through this without you." "That's the point," I said quietly. "He was never supposed to rely on me for basic tools. That isn't a relationship. That's dependency." Mason sighed, a soft sound of resignation. "I figured that's how you'd feel. Just wanted you to know." "I appreciate you telling me," I said, and I genuinely meant it. After we hung up, I sat still for a long moment, letting everything settle. Instead of feeling conflicted or torn, all I felt was clarity. Leaving Logan hadn't broken him. It had revealed him. Without me, the weaknesses he had always hidden from the world were suddenly visible to everyone, including himself. Later that evening, another message came through. The tone was different from the previous ones. Shorter, more frantic, less constructed. "Wendy, I'm serious. Please talk to me. I need to explain. Please, just 5 minutes, I promise." I didn't answer. The next day, I received a much longer message. It wasn't coherent. The sentences ran into each other. He wrote about sleepless nights, panic attacks, fear, and loneliness. He wrote about feeling like everything was slipping away. He wrote that no one had his back anymore. He wrote that I had been his stability. Only at the end did he mention what mattered most to him. "I can't lose the apartment. I have nowhere to go. I don't have money. Please, Wendy, just help me figure this out." It was the first truly honest thing he had written. He didn't need me. He needed rescue, and I was no longer his lifeguard. I closed the message, put the phone face down on the table, and stared at the brick wall outside my window. I felt an unexpected sense of grounding, as if the universe had stopped spinning long enough for me to plant my feet firmly for the first time in years. For Logan, everything was falling apart. For me, everything was finally lining up. By the end of that week, one final message arrived. "If you won't answer my texts, I'm coming to find you. We need to talk." That message didn't sound angry. It sounded desperate. And desperation, when cornered, always finds an exit. I didn't know it then, but he meant it literally. I didn't think he would actually show up. People say a lot of things when they're desperate, but Logan had always been more talk than action. So when he said he would come find me, I assumed it was just another attempt to provoke a response. I didn't expect him to follow through. I didn't expect him to walk straight into the life I was building without him. It happened on a Thursday afternoon at the Daily Grind, the little coffee shop I'd adopted as my home office. I had grown fond of its constant low hum, espresso machines, clinking dishes, soft chatter. Unlike our old apartment, nothing here reminded me of tiptoeing around someone else's moods. Nothing here required me to shrink. I was sitting in the back corner, sketching out design ideas for a project I'd been slowly developing for weeks. The air smelled like dark roast and cinnamon, and the afternoon sun filtered through the windows in warm, forgiving slants. It was one of those rare moments where everything felt suspended quiet, productive, peaceful. Then a shadow fell across my table. I didn't need to look up. I felt the disruption before I saw it. The same frantic energy he always carried when he wasn't in control. When I finally lifted my head, Logan stood there, gripping the strap of his messenger bag so tightly his knuckles were white. He looked smaller. The polished confidence he used to wear like armor was gone. His hair was unkempt, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes rimmed with exhaustion. For a moment, he just stared at me, as if he'd forgotten how to form words. "Wendy," he said finally, voice low, raw. "Can I sit?" I gestured lightly to the empty chair. Not welcoming, not rejecting, neutral. He slid into the seat with a heavy exhale, as though even sitting down took effort. He watched my face with an intensity that bordered on frantic. "I've been trying to contact you," he said. His voice trembled despite his attempt to steady it. "I know," I replied, folding the corner of my sketchbook. He swallowed hard, clearly thrown off by my calmness. "You blocked every number I tried. You didn't answer once, not even to tell me why you left." "You know why I left." He flinched, the words landing like gravel. He rubbed his hands together, staring at the table. "I messed up. I know that. I was stupid. I was stressed. I wasn't thinking clearly." I tilted my head slightly. "You were very clear, Logan." He opened his mouth, closed. It tried again. "Wendy, please. You know I didn't mean that stuff. Not really. I was just being honest," I said softly. He froze. "I heard you." I continued, my voice steady, measured. "I heard you the first time. You said exactly what you wanted to say." He shook his head desperately. "No, I was trying to push you away because I didn't think I deserved you, and I don't know. I panicked. I made a joke, a bad one. And now everything's ruined." He pressed a hand to his forehead as if trying to physically hold himself together. "I lost my job. I might lose my apartment. Everyone thinks I'm a screw-up. I haven't slept. I feel like the ground is disappearing under me." I let his words settle in the air, heavy and unbalanced. He looked at me with eyes that begged for something. Sympathy, reassurance, rescue, anything that would make him feel anchored again. "Aren't you going to say something?" he whispered, voice cracking. "Anything." I took a slow sip of my coffee before answering. "Logan, you spent years depending on me, without ever admitting it. I supported you, coached you, steadied you. And you didn't just take it for granted, you treated it like it meant nothing." His breath hitched, his eyes wide. I know, he repeated, panicked. "I understand now. I swear I understand." I shook my head. "No, you don't. You understand the consequences, not the actions." For a moment, he seemed to collapse inward. Then he leaned forward, gripping the edge of the table. "Wendy, please, I need you. I can't do this without—" I lifted my hand, gently stopping him. Something inside me clicked into place, the final tumbler of a lock sliding shut. The calm that filled me was not coldness, it was clarity. "You were right," I said quietly. He blinked. Confusion creased his forehead. "What?" "That night," I said. "You were right." Hope flickered in his eyes, bright, desperate. "So, you understand? It was a mistake. We can fix." "I wasn't your best option," I continued, cutting through his sentence with a calm, unyielding finality. His face went still, as if turned to stone. "But because of everything you said," I added, my voice soft but unwavering, "I realized something. Something valuable. Something I needed to understand a long time ago." I picked up my sketchbook, closed it, and slipped it into my bag. His breath quickened. "You taught me." I said that I was settling too, settling for someone who needed me, but never valued me. And because of that lesson, I found a better option. His voice cracked. "Wendy, my better option," I said gently, "is a better life. One where I'm not someone's safety net or fallback or backup plan. And that life," I met his eyes not with anger, but with finality, "doesn't have a place for you in it." The hope in his expression died slowly, painfully, as if he were realizing he had finally lost control of a script he'd always assumed he owned. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The desperation, the guilt, the manipulation, all of it dissolved into silent shock. He looked at me the way someone watches a door close on the last exit. I rose from my seat, slipped my bag over my shoulder, and gave him a polite nod. "Good luck with everything, Logan." Not sarcasm, not bitterness, just a simple truth between two strangers who once shared a home. I walked toward the door of the cafe. The small bell above it chimed softly when I opened it. Warm sunlight spilled across my face as I stepped outside. I didn't look back, because I didn't need to, and because for the first time in a long time, I knew exactly where I was going. Walking out of that cafe felt nothing like escape. It felt like alignment, like the world had finally rotated into the position it was always supposed to be in. The sunlight outside wasn't brighter than usual, but it felt different on my skin, warmer somehow, as if I was finally standing in a place where the light could actually reach me. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting to someone else's needs. I wasn't holding anyone together. I wasn't saving a sinking ship while pretending I wasn't drowning in the process. I was just me. And I didn't realize how much I had missed her. Over the next few weeks, life didn't transform in some magical, dramatic way. It settled. It softened. It made space for itself. The studio apartment began to feel less like a temporary shelter and more like something I had chosen on purpose. I rearranged the small kitchen to make it functional. I bought a secondhand lamp with amber light that made evenings feel calm instead of lonely. I placed a tiny potted plant on the windowsill, even though I had no idea how to keep one alive. The bakery downstairs became my accidental alarm clock. The sound of delivery trucks at sunrise meant it was time for my morning jog. My days took on a steady, satisfying rhythm. I woke early, ran until my thoughts turned smooth, showered in silence, made breakfast for myself without waiting for someone else's appetite, and spent my afternoons working on projects I had neglected for years. One of them was a long-abandoned interest in woodworking that I had always been too busy to pursue, busy supporting Logan, busy fixing his mistakes, busy pretending I didn't mind being the one holding everything up. But life in the studio was quiet enough to hear myself think, quiet enough to hear what I wanted for once. I started sketching designs again, sometimes for hours, without noticing the time. The corner of the room filled with little pieces of my curiosity, a new set of pencils, a cheap but reliable carving tool. Stacks of sketches waiting to become something more. I didn't know where any of it was leading, but the not knowing was strangely comforting. It meant possibility. What surprised me most was how little Logan occupied my thoughts. Not in avoidance and not in longing. He simply wasn't part of the internal conversation anymore. My mind had stopped reaching toward him the way a habit does when it hasn't realized it's no longer needed. The silence he used to take up inside me was reclaimed by stillness, peace, and a growing sense of self-reliance that felt like strength rather than solitude. People talk about closure as if it's something another person gives you. But I learned that real closure is a decision, not a conversation. It's choosing to stop reopening a wound and letting it scar instead. It's choosing yourself in a way you didn't know you were allowed to. 2 weeks after the cafe, Mason invited me to a small get-together with a few friends. I hesitated at first, not because I wasn't ready to be social, but because I was worried people would ask about Logan. I didn't want to be the center of a pity circle, and I didn't want anyone rewriting the story for me. But Mason assured me it would be small and relaxed, so I went. I expected awkwardness, but instead I found myself surrounded by people who talked about their lives, their jobs, their hobbies, real things, unrelated to drama or collapse or emotional cleanup duty. No one asked me to rehash what happened. No one tiptoed around me. I was simply included, welcomed part of the world again, in a way I hadn't realized I missed. At one point during the evening, I stepped outside for some air, and one of Mason's friends, a woman named Claire, wandered out with her drink. She wasn't digging, wasn't probing, just standing beside me, breathing in the cool night air. "You seem lighter," she said gently, almost as an observation rather than a compliment. I considered that. "I feel lighter." She nodded, as if she understood more than I said out loud. Sometimes people don't realize how much weight they're asking us to carry until we finally set it down. It was such a simple sentence, but it stayed with me long after the gathering ended. I carried it home with me. It felt like truth. As the days passed, I realized something important: freedom didn't announce itself loudly. It wasn't fireworks or grand gestures. It showed up quietly in morning light, in ordinary tasks, in the pleasure of choosing my own schedule, in the calm that filled my chest, where tension used to live. One evening, I found myself sitting at the little desk in my studio, looking over the sketches I had made over the past month. Some were rough, some detailed, some ambitious. As I organized them, I realized I wasn't just dabbling. I was building towards something. Something that felt like a direction, maybe even a calling. I started researching classes, workshops, small communities of artists and designers. I didn't tell anyone right away. It felt personal, like a seed that needed quiet soil before it could grow roots. I didn't know if it would become a career or a hobby or something in between, but the very idea of stepping into a world that was mine, entirely mine, felt profound. I thought about Logan only once during that moment, not with anger and not with nostalgia, but with clarity. If I had stayed with him, I would never have found this version of myself. The one who wasn't constantly repairing someone else's foundation. The one who wasn't sacrificing her own voice to amplify someone else's. The one who could look at a blank page or a raw piece of wood and see potential instead of exhaustion. That realization was the true twist of the whole story. I hadn't lost anything when I walked out of his apartment. I had reclaimed everything I didn't know I had given away. And for the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like something I needed to build for someone. It felt like something I wanted to build with myself. I closed my sketchbook. looked around my little studio. The mismatched furniture, the cinnamon scent drifting up from the bakery, the soft light glowing from the thrifted lamp, and felt a deep, grounded certainty settle in.